In the vast desert, the strongest flowers bloom not where water flows freely, but where survival demands deep roots and an unbreakable spirit. True family is chosen, not born. The September sun blazed mercilessly over the Arizona territory as 20-year-old Sarah Blakemore watched her stepfather's wagon disappear into a cloud of dust. Gavin McDermott had promised to take her to the new settlement, but instead left her standing alone in the endless desert with nothing but her mother's jewelry box and a thin shawl. The gambling debts had finally consumed everything. Their home, their horses, even her mother's precious silver locket sold for another hand of cards. Sarah's heart pounded as the terrible reality settled in. She was going to die out here, abandoned like unwanted cargo. Sarah clutched her mother's jewelry box to her chest, the ornate brass warm from the desert heat. Inside lay the last remnants of her previous life. A pearl brooch, golden earrings, and a small daguerreotype of her mother. McDermott had taken everything else, even the silver locket that held her mother's hair. The fever had claimed her mother just 1 year ago, leaving Sarah at the mercy of a man who saw her only as a burden. Now, with the sun climbing higher and no shade in sight, Sarah realized that McDermott's cruelty knew no bounds. He intended for the desert to finish what his neglect had started. The thin cotton dress that had seemed adequate in town now felt like tissue paper against the burning wind. Sarah's lips were already cracking, her throat parched, despite having drunk from the canteen just hours before. McDermott had taken that too, claiming he needed it more than a useless girl. She thought of the stories the townspeople told about travelers found weeks later. Nothing but bones bleached white by the unforgiving sun. But as despair threatened to overwhelm her, something fierce sparked in Sarah's chest. She would not give McDermott the satisfaction of her surrender. Somehow, she would survive this betrayal. Sarah began walking, though she had no idea which direction might lead to salvation. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a sea of sagebrush and red rock under the merciless sky. Her button-up boots, fashionable in town, were already filling with sand. Each step sent waves of heat up through the thin leather soles. She wrapped her shawl around her head, trying to create some protection from the sun that seemed determined to drain every drop of moisture from her body. Behind her, the wagon tracks were already being erased by the wind, as if McDermott wanted to eliminate all evidence of his heartless deed. Sarah's legs trembled as she stumbled across the burning sand, her vision blurring from dehydration. The sun had reached its peak, turning the desert into a furnace that seemed to pull the very life from her bones. Just as her knees began to buckle, she heard the soft thunder of hoofbeats. Through the shimmering heat waves, a rider approached on a paint horse, his silhouette dark against the blazing sky. Sarah's heart raced. The townspeople's terrifying stories of savage raiders flooded her mind. But as consciousness began to slip away, she realized that even death at the hands of a stranger might be preferable to the slow agony of dying alone. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, his movements speaking of years spent in harmony with the harsh desert. He was a man of the Pueblo people, his long black hair braided with leather and beads, wearing buckskin clothing that seemed to belong to this landscape in a way Sarah's town dress never could. His face, weathered by sun and wind, held gentle brown eyes that contradicted every frightening tale she'd heard. "Water," he said in broken English, offering her a leather water skin. As the precious liquid touched her cracked lips, Sarah felt tears of gratitude mixing with the life-giving water. This stranger was saving her life when her own family had abandoned her to die. "I am called Whisper Wind," the warrior said softly as he tended to Sarah's sunburned skin with cooling herbs from his medicine pouch. His English was careful but clear, learned perhaps from missionaries or traders. "You are far from the white settlements. How do you come to be alone in the sacred desert?" Sarah's voice cracked as she told him of McDermott's betrayal, watching as understanding and then anger flashed in his dark eyes. "I lost my sister to the white man's fever," he said quietly. "I know the pain of family taken too soon. But to abandon one's own child?" He shook his head, his expression troubled. "This is not the way of any honorable people." As Sarah's strength slowly returned, Whisper Wind shared troubling news. "Bad men follow your trail. Hired guns who seek to capture you. They speak of selling you to a man who buys women for his ranch." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized McDermott's betrayal ran even deeper than abandonment. He had sold her like cattle, and now bounty hunters were tracking her across the desert. Whisper Wind studied the horizon with the eyes of a man born to read the land's secrets. My people have a hidden village in the sacred mountains, 5 days' journey from here. You will be safe there, protected by ancient laws that even the white soldiers respect. But the choice must be yours, Sarah Blakemore. Sarah followed Whisper Wind through a maze of red sandstone canyons, their towering walls providing blessed relief from the desert sun. The warrior moved with the silence of a hunting cat, teaching her to step only on stone where possible, to avoid leaving tracks in the sand. The bounty hunters serve Mr. Crow, a trader in human flesh, he explained in hushed tones. Your stepfather told them you were kidnapped by Indians, making you valuable property to be returned. Sarah's hands clenched into fists as she understood the full scope of McDermott's treachery. He had not only abandoned her, but created a story that would justify her enslavement. As they rested in the shade of an ancient cliff dwelling, Whisper Wind shared fragments of his past. I was sent to the mission school as a boy, learned to read the white man's words and speak his tongue. But when the soldiers came to steal our children permanently, I saw the true face of their civilization. His voice carried deep pain as he touched a scar on his forearm. They said they wanted to kill the Indian to save the man. But I chose to save both by returning to my people. Sarah listened with growing understanding. They had both been betrayed by those who claimed to protect them, both forced to find strength in themselves when family failed them. The sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls, and Whisper Wind's expression turned grim. Two riders emerged from the shadows, Eagle Claw and Stone Shadow, brothers from his tribe who served as scouts. They brought horses and grave news. The bounty hunters were closer than expected, led by McDermott himself, who was desperate to reclaim his stolen property. We must move quickly through the narrow passages, Eagle Claw warned. They have divided into 3 groups to surround us. Sarah felt her heart race as she realized the net was closing. The very man who had condemned her to death now pursued her like a rabid wolf, determined to profit from her misery. The group moved swiftly through labyrinthine passages between towering rock formations, using secret paths known only to the indigenous peoples. Sarah marveled at how the warriors seemed to flow like water around obstacles, reading the land's hidden language. Stone Shadow rode ahead to scout while Eagle Claw covered their rear, communicating with hand signals that spoke of generations of survival in this harsh but beautiful country. As they climbed higher into the mesas, Sarah began to understand that she was witnessing something precious. A free people who had refused to surrender their dignity to an invading culture, choosing instead to adapt and endure on their own terms. The night air carried an ominous howling as the group made their way through a narrow canyon pass. Stone Shadow raised his hand in warning. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness ahead. A pack of coyotes, driven desperate by the drought, blocked their path. The animals were gaunt and fierce, their hunger making them bold enough to challenge humans. Whisper Wind drew his knife while Eagle Claw notched an arrow. Stay behind me, Whisper Wind told Sarah, but she could see the pack was too large, circling them like shadows. When the lead coyote lunged, Sarah surprised herself by grabbing a fallen branch, her survival instincts finally awakening after a lifetime of sheltered existence. The battle was swift but fierce. Sarah found herself face to face with a snarling coyote, its fangs bared as it leaped toward her throat. Without thinking, she thrust the sharpened branch forward, catching the animal in the shoulder and sending it yelping into the darkness. Her hands shook as she realized what she had done. For the first time in her life, she had fought back instead of cowering. Whisper Wind's eyes held new respect as he helped her to her feet. You have the heart of a warrior, he said softly. Your mother would be proud. The words touched something deep in Sarah's soul, a strength she never knew she possessed blooming like a desert flower after rain. Using a rocky outcrop as a natural fortress, the warriors devised a trap for their human pursuers. Eagle Claw and Stone Shadow positioned themselves on the high ground, while Whisper Wind and Sarah waited in the narrow pass below. When McDermott's hired guns rode into the canyon, they found themselves caught in a crossfire of arrows and well-aimed stones. The bounty hunters' horses reared in panic as the warriors used the terrain to their advantage. 2 men fell wounded from their saddles, while the others retreated in disorder. Sarah's heart pounded as she recognized one of the riders, McDermott himself. His face twisted with rage and greed as he shouted orders to regroup. The wounded bounty hunter they captured revealed the full extent of McDermott's desperation. "He owes money to some powerful men in Denver," the man gasped, clutching his injured arm. "Promised them he'd deliver a young woman to Malcolm Hunter's ranch in exchange for clearing his debts. Says she's worth more than gold to the right buyer." Sarah felt sick as she understood how thoroughly she had been commodified by the man who should have protected her. But Whisperwind's steady presence reminded her that she was no longer helpless. "You are not property to be sold," he said firmly, his hand briefly touching hers. "Among my people, you will be valued for your spirit, not your price." The hidden village emerged from the mountainside like a vision from an ancient dream. Built into natural caves and cliff faces, the dwelling seemed to grow from the living rock itself. Sarah gazed in wonder at the terraced gardens where corn, beans, and squash grew in impossible abundance despite the harsh desert climate. Women and men worked side by side, their voices mixing in harmonious conversation as children played freely among the stone pathways. This was unlike anything she had ever seen, a place where different tribes had come together not in conflict, but in cooperation, creating something beautiful and enduring. For the first time since her mother's death, Sarah felt she might truly belong somewhere. Morning Star, a wise woman of the Hopi people, welcomed Sarah with gentle curiosity. "Whisper Wind tells us you carry knowledge of the white man's writing and numbers," she said, her weathered hands gesturing toward a group of children gathered around a fire. "We value learning in all its forms. Perhaps you could teach our young ones while you learn our ways?" Sarah's heart swelled with purpose as she realized these people saw her skills as gifts, rather than burdens. She began teaching basic reading and arithmetic, using smooth stones to write letters in the sand, while the children eagerly absorbed both English words and mathematical concepts, their bright eyes reflecting an intelligence that challenged every prejudice she had been taught. The evening council gatherings revealed a society Sarah had never imagined possible. Men and women spoke with equal voices, decisions were made through patient discussion rather than dictatorial commands, and even the youngest adults were encouraged to share their perspectives. When disputes arose, the elders listened to all sides before offering wisdom that seemed to heal rather than simply judge. Sarah found herself participating in conversations about water rights, trade relationships, and seasonal ceremonies, her opinion valued despite her recent arrival. The contrast with her previous life, where women were expected to remain silent and obedient, was so profound it felt like awakening from a long, troubled dream. As weeks passed, Sarah's transformation accelerated. Her pale skin bronzed from mountain sun, her soft hands grew strong from grinding corn and weaving baskets, and her voice found confidence in speaking both English and the native languages she was learning. Young Thundercloud, barely 16 but already a skilled hunter, began teaching her to track animals and read weather signs. "You learn quickly for one born to the settled life," he said with admiration. "Perhaps the spirits called you here for a reason." Sarah smiled, feeling the truth of his words in her bones. She was becoming someone new, someone who belonged to this place and these people, as surely as the ancient pines belonged to the mountainside. The sacred circle formed at dawn, with elders from each tribe taking their places on worn stone seats carved into the mountainside. Sarah's heart raced as she was invited to stand beside Whisper Wind, granted the honor of speaking before the council despite being the newest member of their community. The wounded bounty hunter sat bound, but unharmed, his eyes darting nervously between the assembled leaders. Chief Running Bear of the Apache spoke first. "We must decide the fate of this man who hunts our sister like prey." Sarah realized with profound gratitude that they already considered her family worth protecting. When called upon to speak, Sarah's voice rang clear across the gathering. She told the complete truth about McDermott's betrayal, his gambling debts, and his plan to sell her to Malcolm Hunter's ranch. The elders listened intently as she described the corruption she had witnessed in the white settlements, where women and children were treated as property rather than people. "But this man," she said, looking at the captured bounty hunter, "was deceived by my stepfather's lies. He believed he was recovering stolen goods, not hunting an innocent woman." Her plea for mercy surprised even herself. The council deliberated through the day, their discussions flowing between languages as each elder shared wisdom from their people's traditions. Sarah watched in fascination as they considered not only justice for the prisoner, but the larger implications for their hidden sanctuary. Evening Star, oldest of the Pueblo women, finally stood. The captive will be released with a message for all who would threaten us. He will carry word that these mountains are protected by ancient laws, and any who violate them will face the unified strength of 4 tribes. The prisoner nodded eagerly, understanding his good fortune. As the sun set behind the peaks, Chief Running Bear addressed Sarah directly. "You have shown wisdom beyond your years and courage worthy of our warriors. We invite you to remain among us not as a refugee, but as a student who may one day become a full member of our alliance." Sarah felt tears of joy streaming down her face as the community welcomed her with traditional songs and gifts. Whisper Wind's proud smile told her that this was only the beginning of her new life. She had found her true people at last. The released bounty hunter's report would surely reach McDermott within days, and the elders knew his pride would demand revenge. Chief Running Bear summoned the War Council as scouts reported movement in the distant valleys. Armed men gathering at trading posts, asking questions about mountain passes. "McDermott's greed will not let him abandon his prize," Whisper Wind warned. "He will return with soldiers or a larger gang, threatening everything we have built here." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Sarah surprised the council by volunteering to return to the settlements. "I know McDermott's weaknesses better than anyone," she argued passionately. "His fear of losing face, his desperate need for approval from other men. Perhaps I can reason with him, convince him that pursuing me will only bring more trouble than profit." The elders exchanged worried glances, reluctant to risk their newest daughter. But Evening Star nodded slowly. "Sometimes the heart can succeed where arrows fail. But you will not go alone," Whisper Wind, and the Scout brothers volunteered to accompany Sarah, despite the obvious dangers of approaching the white settlements. "You gave us your trust when you came to our mountain," Whisper Wind said softly, his hand briefly touching hers. "Now, we give you ours." Sarah felt her heart flutter at his gentle words and the growing warmth in his eyes. The connection between them had deepened through shared dangers and quiet conversations under the desert stars, though neither had yet spoken openly of their feelings. As they prepared for the journey, the entire community contributed supplies and blessings. Children brought small carved animals for protection, women wove a special blanket in the colors of sunset, and warriors shared their finest arrows. Sarah realized she was no longer the helpless girl who had been abandoned in the desert. She was part of something larger now, and she would fight to protect it. "We will end this threat once and for all," she promised the gathering, her voice strong with newfound determination. The dusty streets of Mesa Verde looked smaller and shabbier than Sarah remembered as she rode into town beside Whisper Wind. Where once she had seen civilization, now she saw only desperate people clinging to a harsh existence in an unforgiving land. Her calico dress had been replaced by practical buckskin clothing, her pale complexion bronzed by mountain sun, and her eyes held a confidence that would have been unimaginable months ago. Several townspeople stopped to stare at the young woman who had once cowered in their midst, now riding proudly alongside warriors. At the trading post, Sarah heard the rumors McDermott had been spreading. "Says his stepdaughter was kidnapped by savages," the merchant whispered to his customers. "Been gathering men to rescue her, offering good money for fighters." Sarah's jaw tightened as she realized how thoroughly he had twisted the truth. But now she understood his desperation. Malcolm Hunter's deadline for delivery was approaching, and McDermott's creditors in Denver were growing impatient. He needed her back not for love, but for his very survival. That evening, as they camped in the hills overlooking the settlement, Whisper Wind finally spoke the words both their hearts had been holding. "When this is finished, will you stay with us? Will you stay with me?" His gentle touch on her hand sent warmth through her entire being. "I have found my home among your people," Sarah replied softly. "But more than that, I have found my heart's companion." Under the vast desert stars, they shared their first tender kiss, sealing a bond forged through trials and strengthened by understanding. As dawn approached, Sarah prepared for the confrontation that would determine her future. She was no longer the frightened girl McDermott had abandoned, but a woman who had found her strength among people who valued courage over submission. Whisper Wind and the brothers would remain hidden nearby, ready to intervene if negotiations failed. Remember, Eagle Claw advised, you carry the power of 4 tribes with you. You are not alone. Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of his words in her bones as she rode toward her destiny. Sarah rode down Main Street at high noon, her presence causing a stir among the gathered townspeople. McDermott emerged from the saloon, his face flushed with whiskey and disbelief. Sarah, thank God you're alive, he called out, playing his role perfectly. These savages kidnapped you, but I've gathered men to— Stop, Sarah's voice cut through his lies like a blade. She dismounted gracefully, her confident posture commanding attention from everyone present. Tell them the truth, Gavin. Tell them how you sold me to pay your gambling debts. McDermott's face went pale as Sarah continued her public accusation. You left me to die in the desert after promising Malcolm Hunter you'd deliver me like cattle to his ranch. When that failed, you hired bounty hunters to drag me back. The crowd murmured in shock as the respected citizens began to see McDermott's true nature. She's lying, he sputtered. She's been brainwashed by those heathens. But Sarah's calm dignity contrasted sharply with his desperate panic, and the townspeople could see which one spoke truth. I was saved by people who understand honor, Sarah declared, her voice carrying across the silent street. They treated me as family when my own blood treated me as property. I choose to stay with those who value my spirit over my price. McDermott's hired guns shifted nervously, unwilling to fight for a man whose lies were unraveling before their eyes. Several townspeople nodded approvingly. They had always suspected McDermott's character, and Sarah's transformation spoke louder than any words. McDermott made one last desperate grab for Sarah's arm, but she stepped back with the grace of a trained warrior. You're still my stepdaughter. You belong to me, he snarled. I belong to no one but myself, Sarah replied with quiet strength, and I choose freedom. The sound of approaching horses announced Whisper Wind and the brothers, who had emerged from hiding as planned. Faced with united opposition and a town that now saw through his deception, McDermott finally broke, slumping in defeat as his dreams of easy money crumbled to dust. With McDermott's public humiliation complete and his hired guns dispersing without payment, the threat to the mountain sanctuary finally ended. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders as she watched her former stepfather stumble away, broken and powerless. The townspeople approached her with newfound respect, several expressing regret for their previous silence about McDermott's character. You've grown strong, Miss Blakemore, the merchant said admiringly. Your mother would be proud. Sarah smiled, knowing her mother's spirit had guided her to this moment of triumph over those who would treat women as property. The journey back to the hidden village felt like a victory procession. Sarah rode beside Whisper Wind, their hands occasionally touching as their horses moved in rhythm across the desert landscape. Eagle Claw and Stone Shadow sang traditional songs of celebration, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. You faced him with the courage of 10 warriors, Whisper Wind said proudly. Your heart is truly free now. Sarah felt the truth of his words. She had confronted her past and emerged victorious, ready to embrace the future she had chosen. The entire community gathered to welcome them home, their faces glowing with joy and relief. Children ran to Sarah with wildflowers picked from the mountain meadows, while the women had prepared a feast in celebration. That evening, as the whole village assembled under the star-filled sky, Whisper Wind took Sarah's hand before the gathered tribes. I ask this woman to be my wife, he announced, to share my lodge and my heart for all the seasons to come. Sarah's acceptance brought cheers from the crowd and tears of happiness from Evening Star. As the celebration continued late into the night, Sarah reflected on her incredible journey from abandoned orphan to beloved community member. She had lost everything she thought mattered: home, security, family name, only to discover treasures beyond imagination: true love, genuine family, and unshakable inner strength. The desert that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her rebirth. Tomorrow would bring the wedding ceremony, but tonight she was simply grateful for the path that had led her heart home to where it truly belonged, among the free people of the sacred mountains.